Welcome back. You're watching the budget special on reining in the fiscal. Dr. Rajaraman, let me come to you now on what specifically needs to be done by the finance minister in terms of at least top 2-3 announcements to regain fiscal credibility, to restore a sense of macroeconomic stability when it comes to government finances at the central level.
I think the first and most important thing that the finance minister has to do is to exhibit cognizance of the fact that what matters for growth and what matters for financial markets is evidence that the government is seized of the importance of going ahead with a public investment program, and that is given by the difference between the overall fiscal deficit and the revenue deficit. That is the capital expenditure program of the government, and that has to be preserved at all costs. There are some investments into which the private sector cannot enter. These can only be publicly provided. These are things like last mile connectivity for villages in India. They are still not all fully connected. Preservation of road quality, the rail network, you name it. We have very, very large requirements for preservation or new introduction of public sanitation for public health and so on. These are things that only the government can do, and the private sector will not enter because these are not paying projects. So this is the most important thing that the finance minister has to do, that the government is seized of the need to push public investment and to keep down the current expenditure, the current deficit, the revenue deficit as it is called. The second thing that has to be done, we've mentioned this already, is to pay attention to the three big claimants on current expenditure, which are the oil subsidy, the fertilizer subsidy, and the food subsidy. For the oil subsidy, we've already mentioned these things about the need to have retail prices bear some relationship to international prices. The fertilizer subsidy, the path has been laid out so clearly in the 13th Finance Commission report that I don't want to repeat that. The path is there, it just has to be followed. It needs the political courage to do it. And the food subsidy, we are in desperate need of correction of malnutrition of children in particular. So the targeting issue these are things that need political courage to take on.
But can the targeting really happen this year? Because we know that the government's ambitious initiative as far as Aadhaar is concerned will actually physically take many years to roll out.
Right. We don't have to wait for Aadhaar. We can, as you know, children don't have an identification problem. You can tell a child under 5 from a child over 5. You can tell pregnant and lactating women apart. These are the priority groups, demographic groups who need to be targeted. We don't need to go by the household route at all. We don't need Aadhaar. We don't need to wait for Aadhaar.
Can the finance minister find the political space to actually go ahead and take a tough call on the three issues that she mentioned: oil, food, fertilizer, subsidies? Years have passed. You spent a lifetime in government. Can he, of all people, find that political space?
Yeah, I think one has to find that space. See, for example, now, today we are looking at a fiscal deficit of the central government and state governments combined at about 10% of GDP.
And we've been running that almost for the last 4 years.
Yeah, but people have forgotten that by 2007-8, as per the mandate of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the revenue deficit had come down to nearly zero. It was 1.2% or so. And the fiscal deficit was 2.5%, even though the mandate was to bring it down to 3%. So it is achievable. The point I'm trying to make is it's not as though it's a distant goal, some theoretical goal which cannot be achieved.
Well, you've done 2-3 budgets yourself as finance secretary. If you were currently the finance secretary, what would be on the top of your to-do list as far as the budget is concerned?
You see, the first thing I would do is to shore up the finances.
And how would you do that?
To shore up the finances, you need to basically collect more taxes. For instance, the excise and the service tax, which was lowered as a stimulus, part of a stimulus package, has yet not been brought back to its pre-crisis level. So that's the first thing. You don't really, you are not doing anything out of the way. You're just bringing it back. Right. That's one. Two, of course, there's something which the government has been trying but has not succeeded, bring in the GST. because the GST is going to help in garnering much more revenues. Even the direct taxes, see today there are very, very few people in terms of the population of the country that pay, for instance, income tax. You need to broaden the base. See, there are many ways in which you can shore up the finances, because if you want to go in for expenditure on welfare programs, you need the money.
Right.
And I think this is the error that so far we have been committing, is that we are going ahead with entitlement programs, going ahead with subsidies, without looking at how we are going to finance all this.
I'll come to you on that, Dr. Rajaraman, and this is to do with entitlements and announcements. Should the finance minister refrain from actually increasing, even for instance, the allocation to the NREGA, for instance, which we know has been stable for the last 2 years, but we know there are significant leakages in that. Would that send a clear-cut signal?
I think so, particularly because the asset creation under the NREGA is known to be minimal. It's not primarily an asset creation program. It is a workfare program, and the assets created typically wash away at the next rains. As compared to that, we have the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, which provides last mile connectivity and has been known to boost not just incomes in the village, it reduces agricultural wastage, it improves school attendance, it alters the configuration of the village, which gets that last mile connectivity. And these two programs are very similar, except that PMGSY leaves a lasting effect and NREGA does not.
Right.
So the Prime Minister should not just hold the NREGA allocation or even reduce it, but should explain why it is being done that way. I think one of the major failures of this government, UPA2, is that there has been a failure of communication between the government and the governed. People are not told why what is being done is done.
Right.
And if that is explained clearly and the alternatives prescribed and chosen, there will just be more participation, a sense of participation, and the government will carry the people with them.
Right. Dr. Patel, let me come to you there on this very specific point as to what are the top 3 items that you would sort of highlight for the finance minister and the prime minister to address in the budget, because we were going through what you wrote up recently with Dr. Vijay Kelkar on regaining fiscal credibility for the government of India. What would be on your to-do list?
I think the most important thing is to convey through the budget speech and maybe interaction subsequently by the Prime Minister himself that we have a structural deficit issue when it comes to the government's fiscal situation, in part because of the huge expansion in entitlements that are underway, and the food security bill is going to add to that in amounts that are keeping many people worried, that we would have a structural program to keep these expenditures under control and bring them down. I think people are looking for a medium-term credibility program to get us out of this fiscal steroids that we have been on for the last 2 to 3 years to keep growth up.
Right.
And frankly, I don't see anything but a transition when we will end up with lower growth in 2012, 2013, and I think that needs to come across in the budget speech,
right.
that it is no use assuming growth rates when you are going to bring the fiscal deficit down, and the world for sure in 2011 is going to grow slower than in 2011.
Right.
So India cannot be seen to show we are going to have higher growth in 2012, 2013. I think that imparting that credibility to reducing the structural aspects of the fiscal deficit is key.
Okay. Last minute of the show, Dr. Jha, what kind of fiscal number will the finance minister project for the next year? I know I'm asking you to sort of guess, but give us a number.
If you're referring to the fiscal deficit.
Yes.
Well, since this year we are likely to end with a deficit of close to 6%. So I think he will try to aim to reduce it by about 1%.
Dr. Rajaraman?
I think I agree that we'll probably have a fiscal deficit of around 5.8 this year, maybe higher. And I think he will probably try to project the same 4.6% for next year that was projected for this year, with a promise that it will be adhered to.
Dr. Patel, your number on the fiscal deficit?
I would agree with my co-panelists. I think those broad numbers look sensible and plausible if we make the right assumptions in the budget.
Well, right, and let's really hope that the numbers are solid numbers and that there is a sense of structural balance around the entire budget. But on that note, we'll have to end this show. It's been great talking to you all. Thank you very much, Dr. Jha, Dr. Rajaraman and Dr. Patel for coming in on the show. And let's hope the Finance Minister on the 16th of March stands up and announces a new fiscal roadmap for the country and the world to watch. If you've been, thank you for watching the show.